What's up, everyone? Thralls here once again. I'm Necrotic Nick.
I'm Shredlord.
And we have an album review for you. So one that I had on my radar and one that was kindly given to us by Rotted Life Records was the debut full-length from Laceration, Demise. This comes out on the 16th of July, again on Rotted Life Records. It's been formed in 2006 in Windsor, California, and I know this is their debut coming so many years later, but this band has kind of had a lot of overturn, and I actually was turned on to them because I actually got a compilation of their demos and EPs called Remnants, and as soon as I checked them out, I was like, wow, this band's really good. I wonder what they're up to, and they were broken up at this point. Now, they had gotten back, I believe, as recently as 2019 or 2018, put out a couple of demos, and here we are with their first official full-length. And this is, I would say, death thrash slash straight up Florida style death metal. And that is a definite reason why we're listening to Morbid Angel right now, because yeah, it's that Floridian.
The thing that I can really stress about this album is the heft and aggression that is all throughout this album on all 11 tracks. It is relentless. Just kick-ass, maximum overdrive on 10 for pretty much the entire album. The opening Demise is a small little break from that. However, we wouldn't know it's a break because it's our first little taste, but it's a really nice, dark, somber acoustic piece.
It's an intro I can't bitch about. It leads in with this really cool acoustic melody, and then again it does like a little flamenco lead.
You get some really nice leads up top.
And then boom, the death metal kicks in, and it's this nice little intro, like a nice like mid-tempo kind of bolt thrower groove. Then it just ends and instantly goes into verbal expiration, which it goes from, well, it was already about like 7. It goes all the way to 11 right after that one. It's just massive, relentless, once again, thrashy death metal, very similar to bands like Deicide and Monstrosity, or honestly, one that I got that's more modern, but still kind of harks back to that sound, Skeletal Remains, especially their last album, Entombment of Chaos. This is constantly going. It is, you know, machine gun guitars, double bass is going all the times, blast beats, but also lots of groove and thrashy sections. Now, their earlier stuff definitely kind of had more of that death thrash bounce. It was almost maybe like 60-40 death metal. This is more like 75-25 more towards the death metal. This is way more like Floridian death metal, but with like touches of death thrash. I would say like Demolition Hammer, early Sepultura, Pestilence, that sort of sound mixed in with, you know, all that wonderful Florida heaviness.
2 tracks that really stood out to Nick and myself would be the ones back-to-back, Inhumation and Perpetual Sickness. The thing in my mind that make these tracks stand out is they are a little bit more creative in the songwriting on these 2 tracks. With Inhumation, it starts with a really clever and catchy tremolo riff that we haven't heard yet on the album that really catches the ear, and it just takes it to a lot of different places.
Before this, I mean, they were really just kind of laboring that Deicide style, like just going for it, full tilt boogie the entire time, and it's good. I love the intensity. That is one thing I think on this entire album that I loved is, while they don't have like necessarily the biggest wheelhouse, they do what they do well within the smaller wheelhouse they have, and it's always angry and fast, and I love that. But Inhumation brought in what I like to call an anchor riff. They built around this riff. They had this great groove that went through. It was a little bit more mid-tempo. Of course, they pocketed in some blast beats here and there just to spice up, but this really showed like songwriting dynamics, and the fact that they don't really use like big melodic hooks. This is angry, dark, just, you know, pissed off hooks, but they're effective, they're memorable, they get stuck in your head. And that was probably the first one that was just jump off the page, amazing song. And Perpetual Sickness pretty much carries on that same sort of feel. More dynamics, but still that same level of intensity. Honestly, the entire time I was listening to this, it kind of made me wonder, what if Suffocation played more thrashy style death metal, because the drum work kind of reminds me of Mike Smith in terms of how hard he is blasting. That's that full extension, just nasty blast beat the entire time. And there are loads of like these big chunky kind of Cannibal Corpse like breakdowns with really distinct tags at the ends of the riff, like very like Pat O'Brien sort of style, like just big palm muted chugathons.
And yet another one of my favorite tracks on this album is Imitation. What makes Imitation cool is right away it comes off with this cool little rhythmic chug that kind of sets the groove for the entire song. It goes into basically a Slayer vibe on 10, and I could not be any more here for it. It is awesome. It reminds me of just some classic Slayer with a more modern sound and just insane blast beats behind it.
Oh my god. That was a really cool thing I thought about Imitation and Weaponized Dominion. They both kind of brought forth the thrash side a little bit more, because honestly, this was kind of advertised as death thrash, and from what I heard from them, it was kind of death thrash, but this is definitely going to shift more towards death metal. But hearing those thrash metal riffs come in there, there's a certain energy to it. And of course, like Slayer nods in there, or like, you know, those insanely fast ones like Morbid Saint, like they just fly. And it kind of matches up with the death metal vocals. The vocals on here are pretty much purely death metal vocals. He's got a really just straight up death metal growl. He's not burping the vocals. It's just a nice kind of throaty growl. It's gurgled a little bit and sounds nasty. I would like to hear maybe like a higher scream every now and then just to sort of break it up, but what he's doing well. And it kind of matches up with this old school vibe that this whole album has. This album is so rooted in the late 80s and early 90s. I swear, if you had just shown this to me and told me it came out during that time, I probably would have believed you.
As far as the lead work and guitars go, I thought the guitars were very hefty and crunchy, and the lead guitar player was pretty fucking sick. Very, very, very technical, very good phrasing. I thought that for death metal, he had all the chops, and it was pretty damn creative.
Very Trey-ish.
Yeah.
I mean, we were making
Cleaner,
note
though.
of... Yeah, well,
Definitely cleaner.
Trey's Trey. You brought up that, you know, like, they kind of take, like, one big chuggy riff and kind of let the solos go wild. There's really not, like, a big melody that he's trying to match up to, so it's kind of this free-form...
Yeah.
Let him go. Let him do what he's doing, and he brings in a lot of weird tapping. Of course, you know, you got the dive bombs, the dissonance.
When you're playing over one droning note, you can modulate over that one note a lot. So he did, and it made it sound very interesting.
One thing I think you could say about this, and it kind of goes again with this whole like bullet train mentality, there's only really one like atmospheric break on here. Honestly, the beginning of Inhumation has a creepy sample of something. I don't know what it was. It sounded creepy. But the rest of it is this bullet train style of just song after song. And while I like that, there need to be like a little bit more variance. In the first part of the album, like Verbal Expiration, Bed of Nails, and Monolith, they're all good, but they kind of run together. If there was, say, like a slower song in there to break it up, like something more mid-tempo, because you don't really get the mid-tempo until Inhumation comes on, and that's, you know, 5 tracks. So a little bit of something to break up the pace, because this is a breakneck pace at all times, and I think that's kind of like on the thrash metal side there. But I can't really knock it that much because it was fun to listen to, and I'm impressed with just the overall intensity of this album. Like, this is breakneck speed at almost all times.
And they had a death grind song on there too. Human Malevolence is like this 2.5 minute little death grind jam, and it's over. But what was cool about it is, number one, there was no other track like it on the entire album, so that was cool. And number two, it still felt like a complete song. Even though it was short, it had its section, so it didn't just feel incomplete.
And I mean, if you love riff a minute style of death metal, this is exactly what it is. This, you know, again, reminds me so much of the death metal that I grew up with, and it kind of does capture a little bit of that transitional period between like the heavier thrash acts that came out towards the late 80s and then early 90s death metal. So this is a pretty damn good release, and I'm glad these guys got back together and finally put out this full length, because I welcome more death metal like this. So overall, I'm gonna give this 4 stars. I dug this. This is an intense listen. Again, not too much outside of like the death and thrash metal wheelhouse, but honestly, it doesn't need much more, because the intensity is there, and I think that's the thing that really matters. If this was lackluster in terms of the energy, I think this whole thing would fall apart, and at no point is this waning in energy. I felt exhausted for these guys, especially the drummer. But riffs aplenty, big hooks, grooves, leads, 90s death metal, gimme it. This is solid stuff. Go check this out.
I'm going to give this a 3.5. I think this is a solid debut album. I think there is plenty of promise in songwriting, talent, and musicianship, and I am really excited. I think on this debut, they had a box that they stayed pretty much in the entire time. I would be really interested to see on the next album how much they could open the box and incorporate some different things to not only give it a change of pace, but perhaps give it a few more outside elements that would really make it a little bit more signaturely their own.
Yeah.
So, great debut album, great death metal album. Go get this 100% if you love that 90s Florida death metal shit as much as we do. And that pretty much brings us to the end of the review. So, if you have not already, please hit the like and subscribe button. If you are not subscribed to us already, it allows you to be notified of when we do awesome shit, which is pretty much on the daily. Also, we are now on Patreon. We would greatly appreciate any support you would show us through Patreon. The link is down below. And also, we have our brand new cotton threads. Thralls of Metal Dubs, yo! Anywho, if you want your own shirt, go ahead and email thrallsofmetal@gmail.com with the title Shirts in large print, and we will send you an invoice and get you covered in our love, dressed up in our love, all over your body. So, on behalf of Thralls of Metal, Necrotic Nick, and myself, rock over London, rock on Chicago. Doesn't it feel good to pay less? We will see you later.